Welcome back to Speak Pact. I am thrilled that you are here and you are in the right place at the right time. I have Doug Thompson in the room with me, and he took what might seem to be an uninteresting topic, tech, right, and even AI, and has made it a pretty interesting topic through the power of storytelling. We're going to dive into why it's important when you have maybe a more intellectual or even maybe a sad subject matter area that you train on, why storytelling, how storytelling can help you connect that to the audience in a more meaningful and a more lasting way. So let me tell you a little bit about Doug Thompson and we'll dive right in. So Doug transforms the confusion of AI and cybersecurity into relatable tales through humorous, high-energy, storytelling-driven presentations. With over 20 years on stage and more than 100 talks, including TEDx, he tailors every session with interactive elements and real-world analogies, blending sharp wit and with Iron Man honed grit. He sparks laughter and actionable learning and is on a mission to end Techsplaining for good. So love it. And even those who maybe of us who aren't in tech or, some sort of more engineer minded place, what made you take like a very technical subject matter and think, aha, I think I'm going to blend storytelling into this? Were you a natural storyteller, or was it something you just figured out you needed to do?
The answer to that's yes. So I found out later that I'd been a storyteller since high school days and stuff before that. There's a longer story that goes there. But I'm pre-sales. I'm a pre-sales engineer. So if I'm not connecting with customers to sort of share the value of the product or service that we're selling, I'm not selling and I'm not making any money. So over time, there was a time when I first joined Microsoft that speeds and feeds, that fed everything. You talk to very technically minded people all the time. They're the ones that had the budget to buy it. And every time Intel came out with a new processor, we'd come out with a new version of Windows, and it was just simply time to buy it. It sort of sold itself. There wasn't a lot in there. You wanted to talk about more memory, more CPU cycles, things like that. But over time, as we got to sort of the as a service model, then the buyers changed. The budget would go into the marketing officer or would go to the CFO or do these other things. And they frankly, most of them really don't understand technology to that ones and zeros level and don't really care. They have a problem they need solved. And so I sort of had to pivot, and I did some research on like this pitch isn't working anymore. What do I need to do? What's not landing? And I found out that I wasn't answering those questions. I wasn't connecting with those people. You talk about in technology or what have you. We all use technology, but if I can't explain it to my wife or my mother, they really don't understand the value of that. So that's where stories come in, where I can sort of relate it to their frame of reference. But to your point, this became, it was really a trial and error thing. And as I found that as I would speak their language, and I talk about this in sort of my 8 steps in my book I'm writing. But if I would
Mhm.
speak their language and talk about how we solve their problems, and forget about how we do it, right? That is simply we can, and then paint that future. It's always story. When we were a kid, I read to my granddaughter, I read Harry Potter, I read these other things, and she's really wrapped up in the story. And I said, that's how you connect with people. And really, sales and everything else we're trying is all about, and speaking is all about connection.
Mhm. I love that. And it's not that you're dumbing it down, right? Even if you're in a really academic or high intellect group of people, your concepts are new to that audience and they need to make the connections, and you cannot pre-predict which connections they don't have. So I always tell my speakers, speak at a third grade or maximum fifth grade level, and it almost feels insulting, right? But really it's generous because
Mhm.
you're helping people kind of in a very short span of time catch up to your decades, right, of putting together the knowledge and the solutions that you bring to the table. And I feel like an easy way to do that, we can all, storytelling is a universal language, right? We can
Mhm.
all engage ourselves in a journey. And so what was the step from Microsoft, your kind of high performer corporate person, right? And then all of a sudden you're needing to become a storyteller.
Mhm.
Did you take some classes? Like, what did you do, or just apply yourself? What are some ways? Because I don't necessarily find myself to be funny, or a storyteller. I'm very detailed. I mean, I'm fun, right? Hopefully, but more serious, kind of into the details, those kinds of things. And it's a little bit of work for me
Mhm.
to kind of pull myself out of that. How did you create that bridge for yourself?
Yeah, I loved ever since as a kid. I love stories, and again, doing some reflection, I think, well, what makes me when I would listen to people try to explain things. There were some people that would tell stories, some very bright engineers and stuff, and all that would tell us stories. And I was looking for, okay, who am I connecting with better here to understand that I don't have to sort of get out a deep, a D Techsplainer to understand what's going on. Because like to think I'm in sort of a weird area where I have to understand business processes and all these other things, and then I have to likewise understand the technology to a decent level. And it's funny, so I have to explain technology to business owners. I have to explain business processes to technology and engineers. People, but here's why this won't work. But I just sort of thinking, who do I like to listen to? How do I learn about things? And then I started doing a little reading on brain science of how the brain works. And I use this later for my TEDx that I did. Is that Lisa Cron wrote a book, Wired for Story, and in there, she talks about how our brain is just naturally wired to be attracted to stories and learn from stories and actually tell stories. We've lost that capability with the advent of the smartphone and all these other things. Technology is sort of, we've lost that capability. But how do I get back and connect and understanding the science? It's almost like you're cheating, but you understand how the brain works. I'm just simply leveraging that and using stories to tell those stories.
Love it. Okay, so there is a science behind the madness, right? There's a science behind it. I love that. So you took that knowledge, and I don't know, did you just start reading books on how to storytell, or you just kind of stepped right into learning by practice?
Yes. So I learn by practice. I read a lot, and watch. I love watching. Comedians are the best storytellers. If you watch some of them, their timing is perfect. Their way they do it. Forget about funny or not. I'm watching this visual in this story. I'm playing that movie that they're telling me in my head, and that's what really connects with people. So I say, okay, I need to sort of work on these skills. And again, I think some of us are more gifted in this area. It's not that we're natural born storytellers better, but we're sort of lean towards it, right? That's sort of an area of our expertise. And since I was that way, I simply, okay, this sort of, and I would go out and start practicing it. And when I started getting big numbers in sales and exceeding quota and these other things, I knew it was working. And I would have people come in and say, how are you doing this? And they asked me to go out when we would go speak out in the community or go out to meet with customers and these other things. They asked me to go. People recognized that I was connecting with people in ways that they couldn't go do that. So, I'm always curious. How do I can do things better? But there's no one way to do it. And that's the unique thing about it is, you have to find your own path to play to your strengths. You've naturally given some strengths, and how do you do that? Like some people are a little bit more humorous than others. I appreciate humor. I look to humor. Some people are not, and if you're not, you can use little bits of humor in your style, right? It's not going to be sort of like my style, which is a bit all over the place. It's unexpected when it comes up, or it's just pretty. It's not risque, but it's just sort of to the point, like that. So, but you find your style through trial and error, and then work on that. Again, you have to be the best you that you can be. You can't be me. I can't be you. I can't be Steven Spielberg. I could not do a movie like he does. But in my zone of excellence, I can keep working on that and getting better, and it's through practice.
You hit on a few really important points I want to highlight. Um, Number one, every time you speak, and certainly every time you tell a story, you're collecting data.
Mhm.
And that's so vital. You can't just read a book or even just take a class, even with the practices, you know, practicing that's in there, it's not until you really kind of do the real world work where you're really getting to know what your superpowers are, right? Where you do kind of naturally get the timing or have that certain kind of style. You're collecting that data. And then you're also collecting data on the audiences, the different types of audiences, who responds to what, right? And where actually you should put kind of those lighter notes, because speaking is you're taking somebody through a journey with you, right? You're
Mhm.
taking them on the ups and downs, and you can't have too many downs, but you got to bring them up, and that's generally through storytelling and
Mhm.
even improv, right? Even a little bit of lightness.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're making jokes, but have you ever so we've all experienced this. You've heard the same joke told by maybe 2 different people, and
Mhm.
with the one person that lands, you're just bellyache laughing, right?
Mhm.
And the other person, you're just like, and it doesn't mean that you've heard it before, it just means their delivery style didn't
Mhm.
really land with that. Maybe they hadn't practiced or really gotten
Mhm.
to know their unique storytelling timing.
Mhm.
So, talk a little bit about that. Like, would you recommend somebody takes something like an improv class or something along those lines?
Yeah, in improv, people sometimes think of improv class as simply to be funny. And that can be an aspect of it. In the improv classes I've taken, there's times where you're serious. And really, it's about sort of taking what your communication partner is and building upon it. The fundamental of things, yes, and. And when you're doing this, it taught me, this is probably the most useful skill that it did. It taught me to listen, taught me to
Mm,
listen better. What are they really saying? Where are they going? Listen, and taking, you're able to put what you want to say out, because sometimes I'll say something, then and I expect them to say something. This is because this is what I would say, and they don't. And if I'm expecting what I would say back, then I'm confused, and it just falls apart. We can't play. So it teaches me to sort of give you, like for example, I'm going to give you something, then listen to what you hear and how you use it and come back so that I can pick up from there. And we build a better story that way to go do that. So the improv teaches you to listen and adapt to like you're saying, to adapt to your audience. Because now, I've told the same joke to the sort of the same group of people, similar backgrounds, and it worked one day, it doesn't work the next. I mean, sometimes it just doesn't land. And actually, I've used some of those things there where it doesn't land to pivot and find something that does. Again, the audience gave me something they didn't think it was funny. Okay, well, how do I pivot from that and go do something else? So again, the improv thing, if you learn nothing else, it's about how to listen, how to communicate with other people more effectively.
I love that. And it is about connection, communication, and timing is everything,
Mhm.
right? And I think that one thing that improv gets right too is when you bring your tone down or
Mhm.
you lean in or you get excited, right? You're really kind of helping them through the journey, kind of the mood of those solutions that you're bringing to the
Mhm.
table through that talk.
Yeah, your whole body tells the story, right? And I think that's why when you use the example earlier, somebody tells it and it's a belly buster, and the other one that falls flat, is their body wasn't into it. You could tell that really wasn't them telling the story. They were trying to take it from somebody else or trying to
Mm.
do something as unnatural. And that's the biggest thing because your body will tell you that even if you think it's not, right? Because you've looked at people where they're not interested and you've done podcasts with video. Video changed the podcast a lot is because you can actually sort of see facial body reaction, stuff like that, where your brain can interpret, okay, he's not really into that, right? So this is so I'm going to sort of turn that spidey sense up. We're great about our bodies seeing things that we don't see, recognizing it, but not necessarily telling us about it. Says that's that feeling like something's not right, right?
Mhm.
That's the thing. But if you're connecting with people again on their level, talking their language and stuff, they're more open to, okay, yeah, he understands me. I got it. I'm going to connect with this story because it's words that I use. It's my life every day when I come in. Yeah, I got that rather than trying to paint some picture of something else.
You brought something else up that's incredibly important, and it's kind of a talent. It's an art, but an art that can be learned,
Mhm.
right? We don't have to be a natural storyteller. We don't have to be a natural listener. If we apply ourselves, we can learn. And when you talked about listening to your audience, you're really not listening to any words. Most of the times there's no words. You're listening to the cues that they're giving you, and they're giving you cues. And I love the way that you said you can say the same joke or maybe tell the same story to two similar audiences. It lands one day and it doesn't land the next, or one instance it doesn't land the next. And I feel like that's not because it was the wrong audience and the wrong story. It was just the wrong day, right? You have to hear the mood in the room as well. Maybe something has happened in the community or in the world, or it's just been right after a set of holidays, right? That we're all kind of tired. We're not fully there. Sometimes it's really just picking up on the mood in the room and going with that, bringing them onto the journey so that they can get the most out of what you're bringing that day. What do you say about that?
No, I think you're exactly right, and I try to minimize those misses by getting out in the audience and meeting them ahead before I ever get on stage. Right,
Mm,
I can simply be out there talking to people, what's going on. I'll read the new, if there's any big community topics and stuff to do that, but I'll do that. I'll watch them with other speakers if I have the opportunity to do that, sort of see what's going on, and then try to sort of adapt to that. Right, so
mhm.
because I've never trying to do the same thing twice, even though the message and the material are very much the same. I don't think I've ever delivered anything twice the same way because
Oh, I love
you know
that. Because
just
you
different
adapt
day. Right.
to the audience.
Right.
That's a skill,
Mhm.
right? That's a skill that you hone only through practice. I love that. So you've developed an 8-point system for, I'm assuming, storytelling. You're in the right smack dab, it sounds like, in the middle
Mhm.
of writing a book. Tell me if I'm getting this right. Selling by storytelling?
Sell
Is
by
that
story. So
sell by story?
yeah, sell by being that thing that's in your pantry that should, is voted in 2 elections and should be thrown out. It has a sell by date as well past that. There's sales pitches that people still do today that, they're way past their sell by date. And so the joke or the sort of the underlying story is there. And it's about using stories to really connect with your customers. Because if they connect with you, the more like, because at the end of the day, a purchase other than retail, when I'm down looking, this ice cream bar looks really good. You're buying from people, right? It's not a mood purchase when you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to go do things. It is a connection with people, and they're still buying from me and the company that I'm selling. So I use stories again to connect. That's the most powerful tool that I have, that I can go connect with them. And again, it's about the future for them. You always have to give them sort of this future state. And if you watch movies or something, they'll give you these foreshadowing things that happen, but you can't see it until you look back at the movie and you passed it, right? So I'm trying to do a little foreshadowing of things that's possible. But the 8 steps is part of the broader piece of that. So I have what I call a storycraft framework. And it's these 8 steps. And then and there's actually a free giveaway I'll give you. I outline the 8 steps. I'll give you a PDF that sort of outlines
Fabulous.
that later.
Okay.
And matching it with these 4 pillars of connectivity and resonance and connection, these things that go on. And through the 8 steps are starting the story, where your audience lives. Again, this is why I mentioned it before, using the words that they use. If I'm talking to healthcare, I'm talking healthcare things. I'm not talking about oil and gas. Even though the problems that are exactly the same, the words that they use and the framework that they have are not. And
You're adapting to your
they're not
audience.
want to, so they don't necessarily want to come along with the purpose of starting where my audience lives is I want them to come on a journey with me. And if they think I'm one of them, we're starting the journey together rather than having this huge chasm that they have to jump across.
Love it.
Then we're going to identify the hero, because you have to have a hero in a story. You've watched enough movies to do that, to see that the hero's journey. And this is the 8 steps are sort of a play on the hero's journey, if you will. And you mentioned it earlier about the ups and downs when you're telling a story. And I always try to make my audience, in this case, if I'm selling something, the buyer, the hero in this story, right? So they're seeing themselves in that role as I'm painting this picture for them. And sometimes I'm telling a story of another customer that's been on that same journey, has a similar title, has similar problems, has these other things. So again, I'm trying to help them, make them the connection to what went through. And then we have to sort of have this point here where you've got to have that turning point where I have to make a change.
Mm.
In technology, too many people are happy the way we've always done it, and they won't make that thing. there is a cost to not changing. And I will start that there. I usually sort of drop, here's the cost if you don't change. I won't say it that way, but that's the
Mhm.
point that I make. And that's sort of the inflection point. And then I take them on a journey. There's ups and downs, like you said, because nobody can go either real high all the time or real low all the time without being exhausted. And you have to stand a bigger chance of losing. We made a joke about Private Ryan on there. That, I was exhausted after that movie. It was well
Right.
done. The action sort of broke up some of the sadness in the whole thing. It was well done, but it's just how we need a relief. And to your point there, if
Mhm.
I've got a very serious subject, and sometimes I'll throw in a little bit of humor, or simply ask a humorous question to put a break in that. So give you a breath, because science will show that after you sort of have that, you're open to hear what the next thing is. So
Mm.
I'll use this as a segue into the next thing where we're going to go back down. Cost of not changing, doing these other things again, going to wear you
Mm.
out. And so we'll go up and down of this a few times until the end where they finally see how to conquer. They become the hero. They've conquered this whole thing. The vision. They've conquered that themselves. They have to be the hero. They have to do it themselves. I can't do it for them. That's cheating. So they have to conquer that. And then after that, we start talking about the last step there is, you got to stick the landing. Okay, here's the message I want you to take over. This is the closing remark that you have in a talk. You need to have that one thing that they remember and they can take home with them. Okay, so that's sort of that piece. We're going to buy this in 6 months. You're going to do whatever, whatever. You try to stick that landing. You don't want to lose them because you can do all this work. And then if you don't have, hey, we're going to do a POC and we're going to do very prescriptive on how to get them to the end of the line, you'll lose them. Oh, let me get back with you in a month. Well, okay, you've lost them. The story's not, you they're going to another story. The last thing is I call it your secret sauce. And this is where we get back to what we talked about earlier. The things that are uniquely you, right? And it may be humor. It may be you love to play golf and they love to play golf and you make a connection that way. But it's something there that you can add your flavor to that story, right? You're making that connection with them in there that is uniquely you. I the worst. I'll use an actual example. When I first started at Microsoft, or actually before I did, there was a whole bunch of trainers and speakers that got pulled into this training for launch of Windows Me, which wasn't a big hit. That's how long ago it was. And they were doing this road show to all their system builders. At the time, the system builders were the mom and pop computer shops on every corner that you saw. There were tens of thousands of them in the U.S., and they were rabid fans, right? So they wanted to see people there would be a little bit of Microsoft. So we went through this training, and there was a guy in there, had a tweed sport coat on with the elbow patches and a tie, and very measured in his delivery. I call him the professor, and I appreciate that style. And I started trying to emulate that style again, not being me. And I was failing miserably the whole time. I got to the night before our big sort of, here's our final presentation to see who gets to do what. I told my wife, I said, I don't belong here. I am failing miserably all week. I just, it's not me. I don't know what it is. She said, well, what have you been doing? Well, she says, that's not you. And as you probably can tell by now, that's not me at all. I'm not that reserved and I can't be the professor. And so I went back that next morning. I was me. I mean, there was stuff flying off the table. There was energy going around on that one. I got a call back from the guy that was leading that. And he said, I waited for that guy to show up all week.
Ah.
And then I realized I was trying to be somebody else. So that's why I said, use your secret sauce. Don't try to repeat my steps or anything on there. I'm giving you ideas how to find your own. And that's the big step, because that's really what makes a great storyteller from a good one, is they
Oh,
can
gosh.
use their secret sauce.
Perfect illustration. So, is there somebody who you've come across who was kind of hopeless, hapless, right, in that you were able to give them some guidance and see that transformation even in somebody else? You saw it in yourself. How did you guide someone else maybe through that same?
I used to mentor a lot of people. I still enjoy that. And when I was back at Microsoft, we'd get a lot, especially college students and stuff that would come up. And, I would mentor them and I'd watch them as they progressed. And then I'd watch them do things with the things that I taught them that I couldn't do. Because again, they were using their secret sauce.
Mhm.
So over a period of time, just coaching them, trying to get that, hey, what would don't do what I would do. Because they would ask me what I would do. I said, don't. look, no, what would you do? Think about it. Think what's going to connect with you. Think of yourself 10 years ago. What would connect with yourself 10 years ago? And they would do that and they would pick up. So I've had that a few times. And after my TED talk, which for me, I thought it was horrible. We're our own worst enemy when it comes
We
to
are.
judging how we did. And I couldn't watch it for the first year after it was done because it wasn't what I played in my head. I
Oh
had
my
this other
goodness.
movie in my head. I said, okay, this is some college student did this TED. I don't know what's going on. But a young man came up afterwards and he had like 5 pages of notes from what I had and was asking me clarifying connections. And as a speaker, if I can connect with a one person like that, I know that I've impacted his life and make it transformational, at some point in his life. That's what I
Was there
look for.
some, like, measurable results that you
I
noticed?
I not with him. I unfortunately I didn't stay in touch with him, but with these others, there were. They became very successful in their career. And I've done things with master's students at University of Texas here in the master's program, working with them to do that. I've had several of them come back later, after they've been in career for a couple says, the things you told us about, and this kind of is managing your career. I do a talk on that. That saved me a lot of time, and that made a big change in the way I did things and be able to sell myself, be able to tell my story, which, most of them couldn't do. They'd give me their resume, and I said, "Well, fine, I can hire anybody from here, but why should I hire you?" And they couldn't
Right.
tell me the story, so I taught them how to tell the story, and that made a big change in their career.
That really separates in my view, this is what separates real leaders from forced leaders, right? So you came to the place where there are foundational principles in any given industry,
Mhm,
but then you put you into it and you breathe new life, right? And you get to charter new territory with the way that you do that. And this is such an important principle, not just in speaking and storytelling, but in life and in business. I remember a good chunk of time where I was transitioning in my business a bit from producing events to becoming an agent and owning an agency. There was that messy middle, right? Where I'm hiring all kinds of mentors and I'm taking courses and I'm going to workshops. I'm just trying to figure out how to bridge from where I was to where I envision myself to be. And it gets to a point where you have to okay, mentors are very, very important. Consultants are very, very important. But the ones who lead well are the ones who give you the basic foundations,
mhm,
but allow you to breathe the life into it versus do it this way. This is the way that works. It worked for me. This is the way it works. This is my pattern. This is my 4-point formula, whatever.
right,
And I found myself for a good number of like a span of 3 years, right? Dancing to okay, this is what's going to work. Dancing to this person's song and then dancing to that person's song. I mean, I could have bought a house with the amount of money I spent on
mhm,
consultants and mentors, and it wasn't, Doug, it really wasn't until there was value in each one of them,
mhm,
very great value. But it wasn't until I set it all aside, turned it all off, and centered myself.
mhm,
Well, okay, wait a minute. This isn't me, right?
mhm,
What is me? What do I want to bring to the table, to the world, to my industry, and how do I want to bring it? And I'm telling you, within 3 months, those 3 years that I just been trying to crack that nut, right?
mhm,
My career just soared. And it was a blend of, yeah, have that foundational knowledge, but don't lose yourself, that secret sauce, as you called it,
mhm,
in the interim. So that is not something that's natural. You've got to
mhm.
learn that. How did you finally put those puzzle pieces together?
Much like you, I had to there, when we if we don't know the answer, most of us will seek out expert guidance on how to do that, right? How did somebody else do these things? And what I've learned, and I went through the same, that was me and the professor, that was me and these other things, how do I put this thing together? Well, that's not working for me. Um, and you have to get to that point where, okay, I have enough information now. And again, doing the hard work looking inside yourself, how do I make this me? Right? How do I take what I've got, throw away the things that don't work, put a different spin on the things that do work if I need to accomplish what I want to do and what I want to be, what I want to connect with. I've had management roles in the past, and frankly, the fact that I had to manage up to my managers and be an individual contributor as well as try to help other people was very frustrating. And I looked at my managers. Most of them, made less money than I did and had a lot less fun and worked a lot harder than I did being out at the end. So I said, okay, look, I need to be out here. I need to be talking to customers, selling things, because that's my zone of excellence. And I can coach and I can mentor other people. I can, fine. I'm not a P&L person. So, so I learned, I may have to hire somebody to do that for me when on my own, but I know where that is, and I keep working there. And it's like, know your strengths, right? And understand your weaknesses. That's your blind spots and stuff that you be aware of. But really, we're given these unique strengths that God's given us, and they're all different. How do we make that best out of that? How do you do that? And that's only work that you can do. You can get guidance from experts. Fine, take what works, fine, and what doesn't, get rid of it. But you can't be them. I can't be Tony Robbins. He's a few
Mhm.
inches taller than I am. But I am. But but there are things that
And
he
we don't
does
need
that I can
2 Tony
use.
Robbins.
Yeah.
We need we need the Doug Thompsons, we
Right.
need the Antoniette Roses, right? We need the Tony Robbins, but
Yeah.
we there's something missing if you don't step forward with who
Exactly.
Doug Thompson is.
And that's, I there was a time, there's a person I've connected with on LinkedIn many years ago, and she's done a lot of great things for that. She saw one of my videos. I used to do these things on Monday morning. I'd go out and talk to this big oak tree, but we're telling stories. And she came across a video one day. Leslie Osborne's her name. You can look her up on LinkedIn. And she said, I've heard this story of that, but I came upon this for one day, you today, and I get it. So again, they need us to go tell these stories, because even though somebody else has heard it 100 times, it's not until the way that you frame it, you make that connection with them, that it finally clicks to go tell
Yes,
that story.
very good point. And that is the part that we're talking about, right?
Mhm,
That's where it makes it theirs. So you could have your 8-point system, which is the foundation and it's
mhm,
important,
mhm,
but somehow it has to become ingested and become theirs. So when they put it out back into the world, there's a there's that freshness that only there's just
mhm,
people she's going to attract, and people are going to resonate with her delivery style. Um, and that's what we want,
mhm,
right? Impact more people. So I love that you said that. It's these days, I will hire a consultant for the service,
mhm,
or I'll hire somebody, right, for the service and welcome the consultation that goes along with it. Like I want something tangible that's happening over and above them pointing the way and telling me what to go do. Right. And I run into this with speakers time after time. And really, as a world, we're kind of conditioned to just give me the steps, I'll do the steps, right? Versus here's the foundation, now make it your own.
mhm,
And I struggle with speakers who come to me and they just want me to make their business happen. I have the foundations. We're going to link arms with you. We're going to make this happen. But you've got to be part of that equation,
yeah,
because those relationships we're building aren't going to be mine.
mhm,
If you're going to have a lasting career, they need to be yours.
right,
Right. And so it just is that we all are given those just kind of God-given unique qualities that the other person doesn't have. It's kind of like a fingerprint. So
mhm,
let's put our fingerprint on the stories that help people really grasp the solutions that they're laying awake praying
mhm.
for at night. So love, love. Tell us about how we can get a hold of your book when it's finally released and how we can find you.
Sure. So keep follow. I'll sort of keep everybody on LinkedIn posting. And LinkedIn's the place I'm most active at. I'm on Instagram too, and sadly I got a TikTok account which I haven't quite figured out yet, but I'll figure that out one of these days. But yeah, and I've got my podcast. You were a guest on my podcast,
Yes.
and we had a lot of fun on that one. And it's storytellers and things like that. But the book Sell by Story, look, it's going to be published through all the major things: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, things like that. But I'll keep you. I'm aiming for like first of the year, so it's a great New Year's present for everybody else.
Fabulous.
But again, as you've said, it's a tool set for you to use and build your own story out of. I'm simply sharing these things that overall work. There's a certain science to storytelling which falls into the background. How you leverage that is up to you,
Hmm.
right? How much of this flavor, this particular step you use more than this one, that's all up to you. And that's really what it's all about, is to go ahead and do that. And uh, I appreciate all this. TheDougThompsonTX.com is my website. I'm in the process of sort of revamping that a little bit. You'll learn a little bit about barbecue on there right now, and this whole thing. I blame Doug because I've got this mad side that comes up, and I get blamed things for like egg surcharge at Waffle House and stuff. But that's a longer story.
Now, I have thedougthompson.com, but it's the Doug Thompson
That one will get you
TX.
there too. Yeah, that one
Okay.
will get you there. Either one. Yeah,
All right, and Thompson is just Thompson.
correct.
How can everyone find your fabulous podcast?
On all the major platforms, it's very hard to find. It's the Doug Thompson podcast. Yeah.
The Doug Thompson podcast.
I wanted to. I use that as a joke. I could say, well, that's aspirational because it takes a lot to be the Doug Thompson. There's a lot of anybody can be a Doug Thompson. There was somebody got arrested for murder in my neighborhood when I was a teenager, and all my friends wouldn't hang around me that next summer because they thought it was me.
Oh my goodness.
But so that's the risk of
Yeah.
being a Doug Thompson in that case.
Well, who is your podcast for? What's the focus?
So it's speakers, storytellers, event planners. I'm trying to build a community, right? Because getting a speaking gig is hard, and as an event planner, if you said, there's a lot of risk involved in that. So how do you get to know your speakers before you really book them and things like that? So that's sort of the way that I'm trying to build a community of people like that. That just again, and storytellers, people that love to tell stories. Because again, you can learn some interesting facts from somebody's way that they tell a story, and you may find
Mhm.
it how, hey, this little bit here works, and this is the piece I've been looking for. So that's what I hope to build.
Yes. Okay. Love it. All right. You know my signature question.
Mhm,
And tell us if if I know I'm not connecting with my audiences, I'm not
mhm,
adapting to my audiences quite as much as I'd like to. You gave us some amazing clues. Shake hands beforehand. I think that's
mhm,
so incredibly important. And the speakers who do that before and after go further, farther, faster, right?
mhm,
Other opportunities come up in those situations, but the biggest thing that happens is you're collecting real time data
mhm,
that you can hire any marketer. This is just invaluable. So
mhm,
shake those hands. But what are some other ways that we can become a better storyteller
mhm.
in with the goal of really adapting to, hearing, and understanding and connecting with our audiences?
I call it learning to think in story. And what I mean by that is stories are all around us if you're just open to look for them. So go out today, just through your day, and look at the things that you would normally pass by. Right. So, there's a lot of different things that happen every day that come on. We've had a guy coming to wash our windows today, and the dogs really go nuts. And so I had to sort of arrange the track around that. But come with a story because will relate. That's the way it relates to people. And if you're going to your audience, watch the stories that are going on. Watch the news to get stories because they're all around. But you have to be open to looking for them. That's the biggest thing. Look for they're all around us. I find, like I talked about that Monday mindset thing where I'd go talk under a tree. It was simply sharing a story that I'd found that day or that week or something that had come along that made a connection with somebody. Right. And it has a deeper meaning than simply I use the story as a vehicle to sort of convey that deeper meaning. And just practice.
And I
That's
love those
practice.
just everyday little quips, right,
Mhm,
that happen that are current and that really feel like that keeps you current and relevant. How do you capture those? You're going along your day, you're not thinking story, but something happens, you're like, wow, that's it. That would make it. How do you capture that on the fly?
Siri, write this down. That's the way that I
Good, good.
end up doing most of those things. Because I learned I would when I used to run, when I used to do Ironman and stuff, when I used to run, I'd get a lot of ideas on the run and I'd stop. And I was usually panning so bad, I would only use a few words. So you have to sort of say enough words that you'll actually remember what this means when you're
Mhm.
done. but write a few details about it. And then especially, okay, here's the story I saw, two dogs walking, blah, blah, blah. It ties to this sort of deeper meaning of an event that happened or something like that. And then go
Yeah.
back and revisit that when you're through exercising or whatever at the end of the day. Just sort of come back and think about that.
Yeah, I love that. And there's really no reason these days not to, even if you have to jot, if you're
Mhm.
somebody who likes the tactical,
Yeah.
writing it
Siri's talking
down.
to me right now.
'Cause you
I
said
woke her up.
said his name. But I think it was Cesar Castro, who was a guest last year. He calls it a story bank.
Mhm.
And there's all different ways that you can deposit those stories throughout the day into your bank. There's Trello, there's Siri, who I guess it just puts it in a folder. There's Google Docs, like we just Dropbox. There's so
Mhm.
many ways that we can do that. Just be consistent, I think would be the biggest
Yeah. Aim for one
encouragement.
story a day. Start small. Aim for one
Aim
story a
for
day.
one story a day. I love that. And do you see stories mainly like how do you, because it can be sensitive too. What if
Mhm.
it involves a family member or
Mhm.
involves somebody else? How do you kind of get around that where it can relate to the audience? It's a real story,
Mhm.
but you're protecting the innocent.
Well, I mean, there's a lot from making a composite character out of it, or I saw this mother and daughter out when it's really my wife and my daughter. You can do it that way. Just make it sort of generic to tell that, and it still has pretty much the same effect.
Yeah, and I would say this as well. When you are telling a story, be on the other side of it.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that? Like,
Yeah,
don't be right in the midst of it. Definitely don't air dirty laundry or speak from open wounds,
right.
right? There needs to be a tidy bow
Mhm.
at the end of the story. Am I on track there?
No, you are, and again, what's the goal of the story that you're telling, and it's to get to usually some point that is worth sharing. To use the TED example, there's a single thought or an idea that's worth sharing, and that should be your goal. The story is a vehicle to tell that, to get it to connect with people. But again, at the end of the day, it shouldn't be hurtful. This is not meant to be a political lie about somebody else or something like that. Don't spin it that way. You can, but you don't. That's just at the end of the day. That's the dark side of storytelling, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
But what is the positive outcome you want to come? And I always try to approach things with gratitude. So Tara LaFon Gooch is a connection of mine, and she always comes at things with gratitude. And somebody's asked me, "How do you do this?" I said, "I'm not happy all the time, but I'm grateful for the things that I've been given and the opportunities. And sometimes you're given a challenge for you to grow. Sometimes it doesn't look like a gift that you should be grateful for. But there's times in my career where I've struggled and I look back and it was put there to prepare me for what was next. So don't, just use it that way. Use it as a way to sort of message for good. If you come out with, you want to tell a positive story, positive outcome to come in and make that point. That's the way I use it.
And have an outcome. That's so important that you brought that up because we've all been around those people who are just telling endless stories. And you're like, "Wha,"
Mhm.
like, are
Okay.
they bragging on themselves? Like, well, do
Yeah.
they just want us to know everything about where are we going with this?
Right. Right.
Right? So have that outcome.
Yeah.
And I love how you said learn to think in story. How do you do that? What is that?
It takes work, but it's actually sort of funny because we're naturally wired to do that. We're wired for story, so we're just simply opening that part of our brain now that looks for entertainment, right? To be entertained because we've all sort of fallen into that thing and making it more focused on, okay, I'm needed, let's think about a story. Can I make a story out of this? And again, as a speaker, how we make our living is storytelling. So we need to have that bank of stories because you never know when you're going to come to that audience where that story you thought of 3 weeks ago is perfect for this audience. And if I never would have done that, then I'm sort of like a gap and I'm not serving my audience. It is when I design a talk, I'm always thinking with the audience in mind. You mentioned that earlier, right? How do I want them to feel after this is done? How do this is what that, and so that's the perspective I have is sort of that outside in. It's not that I don't design a talk for me. I design a talk for what the audience needs to hear to be transformed to go do something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking from the audience perspective of, if I'm talking to a bunch of engineers, sales engineers, I need to meet quota, right? So I'm going to come up from that. How do I help them where they can make quota a lot easier, overcome some of the challenges that I've had to go do that? You like now, right now, you look at AI, most buyers now are more informed about a product than the person trying to sell it to them is. So again, speeds and feeds don't mean anything. Techsplaining won't help me here. How do I connect with them? I'm solving this problem. And
Oh,
again,
so
that's
good.
where I'm on that other side. I've got this problem and look around how other people have solved it. That's usually a good clue. But again, like we talked about earlier with consultants, that may not be what's best for them. So if I understand them a little bit more about them as an individual, I do a little LinkedIn stalking to find out what they like. And, do they like golf? Do they like these other things? And then I can use that as leverage to sort of, again, start the story where they are. And that's the most powerful. Those make the biggest connections.
So what I'm hearing from you is when you're thinking in story, you're basically recognizing the bridges. You're
Hmm.
recognizing what is where you are and how you can bridge them to
Hmm.
connect.
Hmm.
And it's about them, it's not about you.
Right.
I think that's the biggest takeaway that I'm
Hmm.
getting
Yeah.
out of what you're sharing.
Yeah. It's about going to them, not having them come to you. I like
Ooh,
that.
going with them. Yeah, very good. Okay, fabulous time. Thank you, Doug. It's always such a rich time when we're together. So
Thanks.
thank you for sharing with the Speak Packed audience today.
Thank you very much.
Ciao, ciao for now.